Today, we explore how this date completely reshaped our world across five powerful dimensions: culture, education, finance, politics, and technology. This day proves that history never rests. Let's dive into the fascinating interconnected events of this date that continue to influence how we live, think, and innovate today. So, without much further ado, let's go.
If I asked you to pinpoint, like, the most dangerous paradigm-shattering day of the year, you might guess the Ides of March, or, maybe a date synonymous with a major stock market crash.
Right. People usually jump to like late October for that sort of thing.
Exactly. But when you actually stack up the historical sources, the data points to a completely random, unassuming day in late summer. I mean, August 17th.
It really is a statistical anomaly. When you look at the timeline, it is the absolute definition of a historical pressure cooker.
And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive today.
Huh.
I have a massive stack of sources sitting in front of me right now.
Oh, yeah, I see them. You've been devouring those.
Right. We're talking historical archives, economic analyses from the Brookings Institution, scientific logs from Caltech, and even presidential transcripts. And we're going to use these to uncover why August 17th repeatedly serves as a catalyst for, well, massive world-altering shifts.
Yeah, it's a huge topic.
It is. We are going to look at culture, education, finance, and technology, and hopefully help you see how this single calendar day reflects the absolute extremes of human ambition.
And we're not just going to give you, a chronological table of contents. The goal here is to synthesize exactly why these specific events on this date fundamentally change the mechanics of how the world operates. Because there's a profound structural pattern hiding in plain sight.
Okay, let's start with the cultural earthquakes. Looking at the records for August 17th, there's this recurring theme of the fall of old regimes and the incredibly messy birth of new autonomies.
For sure.
And we can start setting the stage way back on August 17th, 1876. This is when Richard Wagner premiered Götterdämmerung at the Bayreuth Festspielhaus in Germany.
Which translates to the Twilight of the Gods. It's the final opera in his massive ring cycle. And it is crucial to understand what this piece of art is actually doing.
What do you mean?
Well, it literally depicts the fiery destruction of the old mythological world order to make way for a completely new human era. Valhalla burns, the gods lose their power.
Wow.
Yeah. It is a 4-hour artistic exploration of a paradigm shift, premiering on a day that, historically, seems to just attract paradigm shifts.
Because if you fast forward to August 17th, 1945, you see that Twilight of the Gods playing out in literal geopolitical reality.
Absolute right.
This is the date Sukarno and Muhammad Hatta read the proclamation of Indonesian independence. It was at exactly 10 a.m. Tokyo Standard Time in Jakarta. And this was the moment they formally broke from both Dutch colonial rule and Japanese control.
And, the context of that 1945 document is incredibly tense. The Japanese had unofficially surrendered to the Allies just days prior, immediately following the atomic bombings.
Right, so everything was in chaos.
Total chaos. Suddenly, there's this massive, dangerous power vacuum in Indonesia. You had this intense friction between the older generation of Indonesian leaders who basically wanted to carefully work through the Japanese-sponsored preparatory committee.
To do it officially, right?
Yeah, exactly. But then you had the youth, the Pemuda, who were demanding immediate unilateral action. rebellion.
They didn't want their freedom to look like a parting gift from a defeated Japan.
Precisely. They actually kidnapped Sukarno and Hatta to force their hand.
Wait, really? Kidnap them?
Yes. So Hatta drafts the proclamation at the very last minute at 56 Jalan Pengansan Timur. It was a chaotic scramble to seize their own destiny before the Dutch could return to reclaim their colony.
And there's this fascinating detail right on the document itself. The sources show they dated the proclamation '05.
Yeah, that '05 refers to the Japanese imperial year 2605.
Oh, wow.
Even as they were actively throwing off foreign control, the administrative reality of the Japanese occupation was literally stamped onto the very document declaring their freedom.
That perfectly captures how messy the transition of power is.
Yeah.
But the sheer will to declare independence on that day triggered a 4-year revolution.
It did.
And that pattern of breaking colonial ties continues right on schedule. Exactly 15 years later, on August 17, 1960, the nation of Gabon officially gained full independence from France.
Right.
They transitioned from an autonomous republic within the French community to a fully sovereign state. But these cultural shifts on August 17th aren't just about nations throwing off empires.
No, sometimes they are about individuals attempting to radically shift societal power dynamics.
Which brings us to some heavily scrutinized historical figures.
Right. And as we look at the historical sources for these next two figures, Marcus Garvey and President Bill Clinton, it is obvious we are dealing with highly polarizing individuals.
Yes, very polarizing.
Mm.
And I want to be really clear to you listening right now. These figures are heavily debated today by both the left and the right.
Mm.
And our explicit directive here is that we are not taking sides.
Exactly. We are not passing judgment or endorsing any left-wing or right-wing political viewpoints.
Not at all. We are strictly and impartially reporting the historical facts and the ideas just as they are contained in the source material.
Right. We are just analyzing the mechanism of the events.
So moving to the archives, they show that August 17, 1887 is the birth date of Marcus Garvey in Jamaica. Garvey became a towering figure who fought relentlessly for Black nationalism and economic independence in the early 20th century.
He really did. He founded the Universal Negro Improvement Association, or UNIA, which grew into a massive global movement.
The scale of what he was trying to build was just huge. He launched the Black Star Line.
Right, the shipping company.
Yeah, it was a Black-owned passenger ship fleet intended to foster global trade and facilitate the Back to Africa movement. The archives show he wanted to build restaurants and shopping centers to ensure complete Black economic independence.
But his ideology was rooted in strict racial separatism, and that brought him into heavy, bitter conflict with other major civil rights leaders of the time, like W.E.B. Du Bois, who were fighting for integration.
Right.
Garvey's strategies were highly controversial. The historical record includes meetings he held with white supremacists like the Ku Klux Klan.
Wait, he met with the Klan?
Yes, because they actually shared a mutual interest in racial separation.
Wow. And he was eventually heavily investigated by J. Edgar Hoover. He was charged with mail fraud regarding the sale of stock for a ship called the Orion.
He was.
He was convicted and eventually deported back to Jamaica after his sentence was commuted by President Coolidge.
Yet, despite the fraud conviction and the intense controversies, the National Archives highlight that his ideology left a massive legacy.
Yeah.
His fierce push for economic autonomy eventually influenced both the Black Power movement and the Rastafari movement. It was a radical attempt to upend the existing racial hierarchy.
And then, on August 17th, 1998, we have a completely different kind of cultural shockwave. President Bill Clinton addressed the nation from the map room in the White House.
Oh, right.
This was the moment he admitted to an improper physical relationship with Monica Lewinsky, stating that it constituted a critical lapse in judgment and that he had misled people, including his wife and his cabinet.
If you read the transcript of that speech, you see a president attempting to draw a very strict boundary between his public duty and a private failing.
Yeah, he really hammered on that.
He explicitly stated that while his answers in a previous January deposition were legally accurate, he didn't volunteer information. He complained heavily that the independent counsel investigation had gone on too long.
Right, moving from business dealings 20 years prior into his private life.
Exactly. He was fundamentally asking the public to let him reclaim his family life while remaining in office.
Okay, let's unpack this. Looking at all these events, there's a clear through line. August 17th seems to operate as a historical contract-breaking day.
I like that analogy.
Right. I mean, Indonesia and Gabon broke their colonial contracts. Marcus Garvey spent his life trying to break the racial hierarchy contract of his era. And the Clinton address was the incredibly public breaking of a trust contract between an elected official and the electorate.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that is exactly the pattern. These cultural shifts fundamentally redefine who holds power and accountability in a society.
Yeah.
A societal contract only works if both sides agree to the illusion of its permanence. On August 17th, humanity seems uniquely prone to shattering that illusion and forcing a renegotiation of reality.
But I have to ask, once that reality is shattered, how do people figure out how to operate in a newly formed world?
That is where the democratization of knowledge comes in. The sources point to August 17th as a day of radical shifts in how survival tools are distributed.
And the timeline here is vast, starting way back on August 17th, 1488.
Yes, in Finland. A man named Conrad Bitz, who was the Bishop of Turku, signs the preface to a book called the Missale Aboens.
Which is officially recognized as the oldest known book of Finland.
Right. It was a missal, which is a book containing the texts and instructions used in the Catholic Mass, but its significance goes way beyond the religious aspect.
How so?
Well, the printing of this book represents the formal, structural introduction of recorded, standardized knowledge into that specific society.
And then the sources jump across the world, and a few centuries forward to August 17th, 1953 in Southern California.
Quite a leap.
Yeah. This is the date of the very first meeting of Narcotics Anonymous.
An event that launched a massive global support structure for people struggling with addiction.
Now, I have to push back here. I am looking at a 15th century Finnish mass book and a 1950s addiction support group. These feel completely unrelated. Are we just forcing a connection here because they share a date?
It definitely looks like a stretch on the surface, absolutely. But let's look at the mechanism of how information travels. It is about the architecture of how a society learns to survive.
Okay, I'm listening.
Think of the Missale Aboens as a broadcast tower. It is top-down, formal, institutional knowledge being printed and handed down to the people by an authority figure to standardize a cultural operating system.
Okay, so it's top-down, like a broadcast tower. Yeah.
Right. But Narcotics Anonymous in 1953, that is the invention of a mesh network. It is bottom-up, peer-led, social education.
Oh, I see.
It isn't an institution handing down a rule book. It is people sitting in a circle saying, here is how I survived yesterday. Maybe it will help you survive today.
That's a great way to put it. So both of these events, separated by nearly 500 years, represent massive leaps in the democratization of survival tools. Knowledge went from being something hoarded by institutions to something that could be distributed directly among peers.
Exactly. And once you democratize knowledge, the natural next step is the democratization of commerce and scale. Which brings us to the third part of our deep dive, the financial engines that either propel societies forward or bring them to a screeching halt.
And on August 17th, the historical record gives us the absolute extremes of both acceleration and collapse. Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's start with the acceleration. August 17th, 1807.
Okay.
A man named Robert Fulton inaugurates the world's first commercial steamboat service.
The physical reality of trade before this moment is hard for us to grasp today. You were entirely at the mercy of the wind and the river currents.
It must have been agonizingly slow.
Slow, unpredictable, and incredibly expensive. A wealthy landowner named Robert R. Livingston had actually convinced the New York State Legislature to give him exclusive rights to operate steam-powered boats on the Hudson River.
But there was a catch, right?
A brutal constraint. He had to produce a boat within 1 year that could run upstream at 4 miles an hour.
He failed. He couldn't hit the 4-mile-an-hour mark.
He couldn't do it. So later he goes to France as a U.S. minister and he runs into Robert Fulton.
Just a chance meeting.
Yeah, Fulton was an American who was over there studying submarines and torpedoes, highly experimental engineering. They team up, and on August 17th, Fulton's North River steamboat, which later became known as the Clermont, leaves New York City for Albany on the Hudson River.
It fundamentally unfreezes trade logistics. Fulton proved that commerce could be mechanized, predictable, and continuous, regardless of which way the wind was blowing. It was the birth of modern logistical momentum.
This raises an important question, though. If Fulton's steamboat represents the ultimate unfreezing of an economy, we have to look at the exact opposite end of the spectrum, August 17th, 1998.
Which, incredibly, is the exact same day that Bill Clinton was giving his map room address. While the U.S. was locked into a political scandal, The global economy was quietly having the financial equivalent of a catastrophic engine failure.
You are talking about the Russian financial meltdown. The Brookings Institution analysis we have on this explains the mechanics of how a modern economy just stops.
Yeah, on August 17th, 1998, just a month after receiving a massive international package of emergency financing, Russia was forced to devalue the ruble.
It was a free fall.
To give you an idea of the sheer scale of the drop, the exchange rate on August 14th was 6.29 rubles to the dollar. By early September, it crashed to 21 rubles to the dollar.
But the currency crash was only the spark. Russia also declared they were restructuring all official domestic currency debt obligations through the end of 1999.
And then came the really drastic move.
Right. They imposed a 90-day moratorium on the repayment of private external debt to aid their commercial banks. The Brookings report specifically notes this applied to forward contracts and margin calls on repurchase operations with foreign banks.
Okay, pause. For those of us who don't trade international debt on our lunch break, what does a margin call actually look like in this context? How does that freeze an economy?
Well, think of the global banking system like a massive interconnected pawn shop.
Okay, a pawn shop. I can picture that.
Banks borrow money from each other constantly, and they leave assets like Russian government bonds, for example, as collateral.
Makes sense.
A margin call happens when the value of that collateral suddenly drops. The pawn shop owner basically calls and says, "The watch you left me is suddenly worthless. I need you to hand me cash right now to cover the difference."
Oh, wow. And if the bank doesn't have the cash?
They have to sell off other assets, which drives down prices everywhere else, triggering more margin calls. It is a vicious cycle.
So what did the 90-day moratorium actually do?
By instituting that moratorium, the Russian government essentially locked the doors to the pawn shop. They made it legally permissible for their banks to just ignore those demands for cash from foreign banks for 3 whole months.
They threw a massive wrench into the gears to stop their economy from completely bleeding out. If you're wondering how a localized debt issue in Moscow impacts your own bank account, this is why. It shows how fragile the global mesh network of finance is.
Exactly.
A freeze in one country's collateral can trigger an instant liquidity crisis for a bank in London or New York.
Fulton built an entirely new economic paradigm based on momentum. The 1998 Russian crisis exposed what happens when economic fundamentals utterly fail and that momentum violently seizes up.
So we have seen August 17th break cultural contracts, rewrite the blueprints of education, and push financial engines to their absolute limits. But what happens when our earthly structures are all set, or at least resetting?
Where does human ambition go then?
Yeah, it looks outward. It pushes into the absolute most extreme physical environments imaginable.
It really does.
Let's look at the scientific logs. August 17th, 1977. The Soviet icebreaker Arktika becomes the first surface ship in human history to reach the North Pole.
Think about the sheer violence of that engineering.
Ramming a steel hull through the absolute thickest, most unforgiving, crushing ice on our own planet.
But conquering Earth's extremes wasn't enough. Exactly 7 years prior, on August 17, 1970, the Soviet Union launched the Venera 7 probe.
To Venus.
Yes, and it is hard to overstate just how hostile Venus is. We are talking about a planet with a crushing atmosphere that is 90 times heavier than Earth's.
That's insane.
It has temperatures hot enough to melt lead and thick clouds of sulfuric acid. Previous probes had literally been crushed like empty tin cans just trying to descend through the atmosphere.
But Venera 7 was built differently. They engineered a titanium pressure vessel to house the instruments, and they cooled it down to -8 degrees Celsius before it even entered the Venusian atmosphere, just to buy it some time against the heat.
And it succeeded.
It did. It survived for about 23 minutes on the surface, becoming the first spacecraft to successfully transmit data back to Earth from the surface of another planet.
So we built a hull to conquer the ice and a titanium sphere to conquer the acid clouds of our neighbor. But then we get to August 17th, 2017, and the data from this event is almost hard to comprehend.
This is the Caltech and LIGO data, GW 178 and 28, GW standing for gravitational wave.
Right. To understand this, we need a quick primer on neutron stars.
Okay, lay it on me.
When a massive star dies and explodes in a supernova, sometimes its core collapses in on itself. It becomes so unimaginably dense that protons and electrons are crushed together to form neutrons.
And that's heavy, right?
Extremely heavy. A single teaspoon of neutron star material would weigh about 1 billion tons on Earth. It is like packing the mass of Mount Everest into a sugar cube.
And on August 17th, 2017, the LIGO and Virgo observatories detected the exact moment two of these hyperdense neutron stars collided.
And this wasn't just a flash of light. The collision was so violent that it literally created a ripple in the fabric of space-time itself. That is what a gravitational wave is.
Unbelievable.
Space-time physically stretched and squeezed as that wave washed over Earth, and our instruments measured a change in distance smaller than a fraction of a proton.
But the global coordination that happened next is what really stands out in the logs. Because they had both the US-based LIGO and the Europe-based Virgo detectors running, they could triangulate the signal and quickly localize the region of the sky it came from.
And time was of the essence.
Absolutely. Within hours, they shared this targeting data with over 90 electromagnetic partner observatories around the world.
Because of that unprecedented speed, an optical telescope in Chile was able to physically point its lens at that exact spot in the sky and actually see the visible light fading from the neutron star collision.
Everyone jumped on it. Optical, X-ray, radio, infrared, and gamma-ray telescopes all swung into action.
For the first time in human history, we felt the gravity wave wash over us, and then we turned and looked at the light. The sources note that GW 170817 is believed to be the most widely studied single astronomical event in history.
So what does this all mean? It's like the universe's ultimate stress test for human engineering.
It is a beautiful scientific progression. On August 17th, we moved from mastering Earth's harsh extremes with the Octica to reaching the inner solar system with Venera 7, and finally to building miles-long vacuum tubes so precise that we could unlock the deepest, most violent secrets of the cosmos.
Which brings us back to you, the listener. It is so easy to view today just as another mundane space on the calendar grid. You wake up, you pour your coffee, you commute to work. It feels entirely neutral.
Yeah, just another day.
But looking at the sources we've unpacked today, it proves that dates hold incredible, concentrated gravity.
And that leaves us with a final thought for you to mull over. If August 17th is historically a day where humanity shatters old colonial contracts, where we invent new mesh networks for peer education, where we freeze entire global economies to stave off collapse, and where we literally feel the fabric of the universe shaking from colliding stars.
What's next?
Exactly. What invisible, history-altering threshold might humanity be crossing this very August 17th that we won't even realize happened until historians look back decades from now?
Well, it definitely makes you look at that little square on the wall calendar a whole lot differently, doesn't it?
Hi viewers, family and friends. How did you like the content of this video? Like the video and subscribe to the channel. Please write in the comments your name and the place you are watching from. Since our viewing family is spread all over the world, it will be nice to know which city and the country you are watching from, so I can say hello to you. Science and technology. Reading and listening to the historical accomplishments on this date of those who have gone before us, I, as a professional engineer with interest in structural engineering, energy-efficient buildings, ICF construction, and as Google Docs expert with interest in spreadsheet-based solutions, draw inspiration to ask of myself the million-dollar question. What would I accomplish today? Think about the Japanese practice of Kaizen. Let me know in the comments, what would you accomplish today? Your subscribing to the channel inspires me to post more such videos. Thanks for your patronage. See you in the next video. Sincerely, Yogi Anand.